Hey, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for today's session. And our session today is all about building your confidence with working with academic journal articles. If you're like me, you may have felt that research papers can be a bit overwhelming. They're full of complex words, dense paragraphs, and data tables that just seem really hard to understand. This is completely normal, but the good news is that you don't need to worry about that because we are going to give you the tools today to approach journals in a structured way, helping you save time and extract the information that really matters for your assignments. So let's get on with it. Okay, so academic journals are one of the strongest sources of evidence that you can use in higher education. They usually go through a peer review process, which means that the experts in the field have checked the quality of the research before it was published. So this makes journals much more reliable than blogs or unverified websites. When you reference them in your essay, it will show your lecturer that you are engaging with advanced, credible knowledge. And beyond essays, they also help you to develop subject expertise and learn how arguments are shaped in your discipline. Okay, so what are some of the common challenges you may face when using academic journals? Okay, now it's very common to feel lost when you are reading academic journals for the first time. Many students may find the language overly technical and the sentences are quite long. Okay. Then there's also the issue of jargon. Now, jargon are basically specialist words that may not be explained. They are words that are specific to the industry or technical ones that are subject specific. Okay. Now, the length of articles itself can be intimidating, especially if you don't know where to focus. So you're looking at an article and it's 20 pages in entirety, and you are hoping it has information that you need. However, it's the one of 20 articles or journals that you need to read, and you're just not sure how it could help you. Okay, so that is also an issue you could face. Now, the key message is that you don't need to understand every single word or even read every page in detail. Mind blowing, I know. Okay, so nobody really tells you these types of tips. They just assume you would know. So if you didn't know, here's your note today. So your goal with this session is to identify the sections that are useful for your assignment and then focus your energy there. Okay, so let's look into the anatomy of a journal article or IMRAD. Okay, so most academic articles will follow a similar structure known as IMRAD. So that's made up of your introduction, methodology, research, and discussion. Now, the introduction will basically set out the purpose of the study and it will explain why the research is important. The methodology section will tell you how the subject or the study was carried out, who was involved, what tools were used, and the process that was followed. Okay, the next one, that is the results. The results section are going to represent the data, often in charts or tables or graphs, while the last part, that's your discussion, the discussion interprets what the results mean and how they fit into the bigger picture. So that's essentially what you would be looking out for when you are reading. Okay, so knowing the structure helps you to navigate the article strategically, moving to the parts that are most useful. So if you want to skim the introduction to see, is this relating to information I need for my assignment, you would skim the introduction. You wouldn't head straight to discussion, okay? If you need to know what type of methodology was used, whether it was quantitative, qualitative, or it was a combination, you would skim to methodology. If you're looking at results, then you would know, go to bypass introduction, methodology, and look for that. And if you're just looking for the discussion part of it, you would skim past all of that and focus on the discussion. Okay, so start smart, skimming techniques. So before committing to reading an article in detail, skim it first, okay? The title will give you a broad topic, while the abstract provides a summary of the purpose, methods, and findings. Now, I'll be honest, I sometimes will just skim the article's abstract, and that's most of the crux of the information. I see if that aligns with what I'm looking for, then I will read further. Okay, so abstracts are quite helpful in helping you to decide if you will continue to read the journal in question or if you will skip it and find one that's more aligned with what you are looking for. Okay, so jumping straight to the conclusion, surprisingly, will also help you to understand the overall outcomes. Okay, so if you just want to go straight in, right to the end conclusion, it's a good way to start. Okay, so skimming headings, subheadings, and tables will help to show you what the article covers at a glance. Now, I want you to ask yourself, does this article help me answer my essay question or research topic? Always ask yourself that, and if the answer is no, move on. You don't need to waste your time on irrelevant articles, okay? You don't need to read that for pleasure or for knowledge or extra understanding. Right now, you can always come back to it at some point and then reread it. But if it's not serving your immediate purpose, move on to the next, okay? All right, so finding the key arguments. Every academic article has a key argument, sometimes called the thesis or the central claim, okay? Generally the thesis. This is usually found in the introduction, where the author outlines their research question. The same idea is often repeated in the conclusion to reinforce it. So as you read, highlight, or note down sentences that capture this argument. Also pay attention to repeated terms or themes. If the author keeps returning to the same point, that's usually a sign of the central message. So identifying this argument will help you use the article effectively in your own writing. Okay, let's look at spotting methodology. So the methodology section explains how the research was conducted. Now, instead of reading every detail, I know you're very tempted to, and you're really good in reading scholarly articles. However, this is what we want to do. We want to ask ourselves 4 guiding questions. Who were the participants? What tools or materials were used? How was the study carried out? And why was this method chosen? So this will help you to gain a clear understanding of the validity of the research. For example, if a research study has only 10 participants, it may not be reliable, okay? You would obviously choose research that has a larger group of participants. So that's a good way for you to gauge if you can use this research journal or you should keep looking. Now, you don't need to memorize the process. Just take note of whether the method was appropriate and again, relevant to your assignment. Okay, So let's look at extracting findings quickly. So the results section can generally feel overwhelming, okay, because it's packed in with data tables. It's got lots of statistics in it. You may say, oh gosh, this is a lot of detail. Do I need this? Is this what's necessary? Don't panic, okay? I wish somebody told younger me this. You don't need to interpret every number. Okay, I'm going to say that again. You don't need to interpret every number. Okay, focus on the overall trends and patterns. What direction does the data point lead to? Was there an increase, a decrease, or no reaction or no change? Okay. So the discussion table or discussion section is where the author will explain what these findings actually mean. And it's most often the most valuable part of your essay as it connects to the results back to the research question and the broader field. Okay, let's look at practical strategies. Okay, so there's several strategies to make reading journals easier. One is the SQ3R method, and that is survey, question, read, recite, review. Okay, so this means scanning the article, asking questions about it, reading for answers, summarizing what you've learned, and reviewing later. Now, I don't know if you have incorporated a reading log into your studies as yet, but I would generally advise that you do. It's a good way to keep a record of all your articles that you've read, a basic summary of them. So if you are needing to go back and you're not sure which specific article has that information, then you'd open up your reading log, okay? So a reading log is useful. If you haven't, I would say please think about doing that. Write down the article title, the aims, the findings, and a relevance in a table or a document and save it. Okay. The last thing you want to do is put that much effort into it and then not save your document. Now, it really makes essay writing much easier when you go back and find the sources. And if you like to use digital tools like I do, Zatora and Mendeley, they really help to allow you to organize your articles, store references, add highlights or notes. So these are definitely tools that you can use in your own writing. Okay, so we're almost at the end with our wrap up and reflection. And as we wrap up, I want you to remember the key idea is efficiency. So there may be times that you will have a lot of academic journals to read through. You don't need to read every word of the journal article, okay? I wish somebody said this to me earlier. I used to spend so much of time reading articles and then I'll just get overwhelmed. I wouldn't find my focus. So please don't do what I did. Focus on the abstract. So now read the abstract, read the discussion and the trends in the results. Always ask yourself, does this article connect to my essay or research project? And if it doesn't, set it aside and move on to something more relevant. Okay, so with practice, reading academic journals becomes much less intimidating and much more purposeful. I'd like you to reflect on one strategy you will try the next time you read a journal, whether it's skimming, reading the abstract first, or keeping a reading log, or focusing more on the discussion section. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope I will see you next week as we continue our academic skills workshops. Have a good day. Goodbye.